Every morning, millions of people open their cabinet, pull out a box of cereal that says, whole grain, lowers cholesterol, good source of vitamins, and genuinely believe they are making a smart choice for their health. The problem is that what is printed on the box and what actually happens to that food once it enters your body are two very different stories. Today we are going to look at what the phrase whole grain really means, why lowering cholesterol is not as simply connected to heart health as we were taught, what happens to grain once it gets ground into flour, why you can feel hungry again an hour or so after this kind of breakfast, and why this matters even more once you are past 45, when your body does not bounce back from blood sugar swings quite as easily as it used to. By the end, I will walk you through what a breakfast that actually supports steady energy through the day looks like, without any promise of a miracle, just an honest explanation of why it works. Let's start with the main argument cereal companies lean on. They say oats contain something called beta-glucan, a compound that can help lower cholesterol. And that part is true. The research backs it up. But there is a detail you will not find printed anywhere on the box. To get a cholesterol reduction of around 5 to 10 points, you would need to consume roughly 3 grams of beta-glucan a day. And if you actually calculate how much cereal that requires, it is not one bowl. It is closer to 4.5 servings. How many people are eating almost 5 servings of cereal in one sitting at breakfast? Most likely almost none. The typical routine is 1 cup, a splash of milk, and out the door, with no idea that the advertised benefit would require several times that amount. And here is an important caveat. Even if you did lower your cholesterol, the relationship between cholesterol and heart attack risk is far more complicated than it is usually presented. There is genuine ongoing debate within the medical community on this question, and a meaningful portion of research has found that many people who suffer heart attacks actually had cholesterol levels that were normal or even on the lower side at the time. That does not mean cholesterol is irrelevant, and it definitely does not mean you should ignore what your own doctor tells you. It simply means that lowering cholesterol on its own is not a guarantee of protecting your heart, and reducing heart health down to a single number on a lab report is an oversimplification. Now let's look at what actually happens to the grain itself once it reaches a factory. A whole, intact oat or wheat kernel is built by nature in a fairly deliberate way. The outer structure slows down digestion, but once that grain gets ground into flour, something important changes. The bonds between the glucose molecules that make up starch become much weaker. And once that product enters your body, it breaks down into sugar far faster than an intact, unprocessed grain would. That is exactly why the phrase whole grain on a label does not automatically mean the finished product will raise your blood sugar slowly. The form that grain takes by the time it reaches your bowl matters enormously. And cereal that has gone through multiple rounds of grinding and pressing can behave, in terms of how quickly it is absorbed, almost like straight sugar. Now let's take a real look at the ingredient list. If you check the label on a box of cereal, oats are often listed first, cornstarch second, and third, believe it or not, added sugar. After that comes salt, and then a long list of synthetic vitamins and minerals. And here the distinction matters. Vitamins that were naturally present in the food to begin with, and vitamins that were added back in after processing to make up for what was stripped out, are not the same thing when it comes to how your body absorbs and uses them. In effect, the manufacturer removes a portion of the nutritional value during processing, then adds some of it back in synthetic form, and markets that as a benefit. There is also a separate story around what is often called modern wheat. Back in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, plant breeders did carry out large-scale changes to wheat varieties in order to increase crop yield and make farming more profitable. That part is documented, well-established agricultural history. But the claim that this change is a direct cause of the rise in chronic disease over the following decades is not an established fact. It is a hypothesis that still lacks strong, direct scientific confirmation. Too many other things changed during that same period. Overall sugar consumption, activity levels, and the general degree of food processing across the entire diet. So I will be honest with you, the modern wheat story is worth paying attention to and worth further research, but treating it as the single proven cause of every health problem out there would not be fair to you. Moving on, whole grain contains something called phytic acid. This compound binds to minerals like iron, calcium, magnesium, and zinc, and reduces how much of them your body actually absorbs, and the difference can be substantial. For anyone over 45, this is especially relevant, because calcium and magnesium absorption ties directly into bone health and cardiovascular function at this stage of life. It is worth noting that the size of this effect depends heavily on preparation fermentation method. Soaking, fermenting, and sprouting grain can significantly lower its phytic acid content, so not all whole grain behaves the same way. A properly made sourdough, for instance, is not equivalent to a box of instant processed cereal. Another point worth knowing about is gluten, or more specifically, a component of it called gliadin. Animal studies have shown that this protein can trigger inflammatory and even autoimmune responses. But honesty matters here. There simply are not enough large-scale human studies on this question yet to draw sweeping conclusions for everyone. The clearly documented problems with gluten mainly affect people with celiac disease or gluten sensitivity, not necessarily every single person who eats a bowl of cereal. That said, if you regularly feel heaviness, bloating, or discomfort after eating grain-based foods, that is a good reason to bring it up with your doctor, not a reason to panic. Now let's talk about that hunger that shows up an hour or 90 minutes after a cereal breakfast. Fast digesting carbohydrates cause a sharp spike in blood sugar. In response, your body releases insulin, which brings that level back down just as sharply. And so there you are. You just ate breakfast and you already feel hungry, irritable, sometimes even a little shaky or drained. That is not because you did not eat enough. It is because your blood sugar dropped fast. And often that sets off a chain reaction for the rest of the day. By lunch, you are hungry again. By evening, you are craving something sweet. And the next morning, you wake up hungry, even though you ate a full dinner the night before. As we get older, these swings tend to hit harder because cellular sensitivity to insulin naturally declines with age, which means the body has to work harder to manage these ups and downs day after day. There is another common effect, bloating. The cause here is a type of carbohydrate called fructans. Gut bacteria ferment them very quickly, and that fermentation can produce gas and that bloated feeling in people whose digestive systems are sensitive to these compounds. Many people chalk this feeling up to age or general health, when the real culprit is sometimes sitting right there in the breakfast bowl. One more thing worth mentioning is acrylamide. This compound forms during roasting, pressing, and high heat processing of certain carbohydrates and proteins, and it is classified as a potential carcinogen. It is important to understand this refers to accumulated exposure over many years. Not that a single bowl of cereal poses any immediate danger, but it is still worth knowing where it comes from, especially since many foods that go through pressing and high temperature baking contain some amount of it, and breakfast cereal is no exception. So what should you actually eat for breakfast? I want to be honest with you here. There is no single answer that works for absolutely everyone, and anyone promising you the one perfect eating plan for every situation is probably oversimplifying things. One approach that many people find helpful is intermittent fasting, extending the overnight break from food and eating later in the morning, or skipping breakfast entirely on days when you genuinely are not hungry. The logic is simple. Overnight while you sleep, your body already goes many hours without food and keeps functioning by drawing on stored energy from fat. For some people, extending that window a bit further helps stabilize blood sugar throughout the day and cuts down on snacking. But this is one approach, not a universal rule. And if you have diabetes, are pregnant or breastfeeding, or have a history of disordered eating, please talk to your doctor before changing your eating pattern. If you do prefer to eat breakfast, and for many people that is a comfortable, familiar part of the morning, one of the more stable options when it comes to blood sugar is a protein-focused breakfast. Eggs prepared however you like them, cheese, plain yogurt without added sugar, some bacon or turkey, avocado, vegetables. Protein helps your body repair tissue and supports muscle mass. And preserving muscle mass becomes an increasingly important goal as we age. And it does not cause the same sharp blood sugar spike that fast-digesting carbohydrates do. This is not a promise of some instant dramatic transformation. And it does not mean cutting every grain out of your life forever. It simply means paying a little closer attention to what is actually behind the appealing words on a box. And maybe choosing, a bit more often, a breakfast that keeps you steady and satisfied through the morning, instead of one that has you reaching for something sweet an hour later. So it turns out that the word whole grain on a box and the actual benefit to your body are not always the same thing. Sometimes it pays to flip the box around and really read what is on it, instead of trusting the bright picture on the front. That does not mean living in fear of every product at the grocery store. It means that one small, informed decision at breakfast can shape how you feel for the rest of the day. If this topic was interesting to you, I have a full video that walks through how to ease into intermittent fasting safely and gradually, and I would love for you to check it out if you want to take this a step further.